She was my maid of honor. She was also sleeping with my fiancé. I want to tell you about the moment I found out. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a screaming fight or a tearful confession or a lipstick on the collar moment from a bad movie. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, 4 months before my wedding, and I was sitting at my kitchen table going through the seating chart when my phone buzzed with a notification from a shared photo album. My fiancé, Daniel, had uploaded 3 new photos. We had a shared album for wedding planning, venues, centerpiece ideas, cake samples, that kind of thing. The photos were not of a venue. They were taken in the early morning in a bedroom I recognized immediately because I had helped her pick out the furniture. The light through the window was the specific gold of early sunrise. They were asleep, both of them, Micah. My fiancé and my best friend of 11 years, my maid of honor, Lauren. He had uploaded them to the wrong album. I sat at that kitchen table for a very long time. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text either of them. I just sat there and I thought very clearly and very calmly about exactly what I was going to do. My name is Sophie. I was 31 years old when this happened, and what I did next is something people still ask me about when they hear the story. I went to my wedding. To understand what happened, you have to understand what Lauren meant to me. We met in the 3rd grade when she moved to our town from somewhere in Ohio and ended up seated next to me in Mrs. Patterson's class. She was quiet in that first week, the specific quiet of a kid who hasn't figured out yet whether the new place is safe. I remember passing her a note that said, "Your backpack is really cool," because it had a patch of a cartoon fox on it, and I genuinely thought it was cool. She kept that note for years. She showed it to me once when we were in high school, slightly mortified and slightly proud. We were inseparable after that. The kind of friendship that forms in childhood and calcifies into something you stop questioning. It's just there, like a bone. Lauren was at every birthday. She was the first person I called when I got into college, when I got my first real job, when my parents' marriage started falling apart and I needed someone to sit with me through it. She was my person. That's the only word for it. She was also beautiful in the way that made rooms turn, and she had always known it, and mostly she wore it lightly. She dated a lot. She had a gift for attracting people and a corresponding difficulty keeping them. Relationships that started with intensity and ended in the specific quiet of someone who got bored. But with me, she was loyal. Steadily, consistently, unfailingly loyal, or so I believed. I met Daniel 3 years before the wedding at a work event. He was a structural engineer at a firm that had contracted with my company on a project. He was tall and a little awkward in social situations, and he laughed at things other people didn't find funny, which I loved. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. It was not a grand gesture. He asked me at home on a Sunday morning while we were making breakfast, and that was somehow exactly right. I introduced him to Lauren on our 3rd date. She was warm and funny and charming in the way she always was, and he liked her immediately. They got along easily, the kind of easy that comes from 2 people who share a person they love. I remember thinking how lucky I was that the 2 most important people in my life liked each other. I thought about that a lot. In the weeks after I found the photos, The engagement was 14 months long. Lauren was my maid of honor from the moment I asked her, 3 days after Daniel proposed, standing in her kitchen drinking wine. She cried, I cried. She gave a speech at the engagement party that made my mother tear up. She came to every dress appointment, every venue visit, every tasting. She was present for all of it, and the whole time she was also doing something else. I have gone back through those 14 months many times since, looking for signs I missed. There were some, in retrospect, there are always some, but they were subtle enough that I don't blame myself for missing them. A strange tension when all three of us were together that I had read as Lauren being in one of her moods. A few times when Daniel was harder to reach than usual. A comment Lauren made once, slightly too casually, about how she could see why I loved him. None of it was enough to see. Not until that Tuesday in March and the wrong photo album. I closed the photo album. I put my phone face down on the table. I sat with the seating chart in front of me for another 20 minutes, and then I picked up my pen and I kept working on it. This is the part people find hardest to understand. Why didn't I call them immediately? Why didn't I confront them? Why didn't I cancel the wedding right then? The honest answer is that I knew in that moment exactly what would happen if I did any of those things. Daniel would apologize, Lauren would apologize, there would be crying and explanations, and probably some version of it didn't mean anything and I don't know why it happened. And please don't let this destroy everything. And then it would become about managing their feelings, their guilt, their need for forgiveness. And I would lose not just them, I would lose the narrative, I would lose the control, I would lose the only thing I had in that moment, which was the fact that they didn't know I knew. I had watched enough of these situations in my own family, in friends' lives, in the specific slow motion disasters that happen to people who react before they think, to know that the person who acts first doesn't always win. The person who acts right wins. So I made a decision I was going to act right. That night when Daniel came home, I was making dinner. I asked about his day. He told me. He kissed me on the cheek and poured himself a glass of water and complained about a difficult client. And I listened and nodded and said the right things. And the entire time I was watching him the way you watch something that has already changed irrevocably, even if it doesn't know it yet. I texted Lauren that night. Seating chart is coming together. Can we go over the bridesmaid schedule this week? She replied with 3 heart emojis and a thumbs up. I started keeping notes. Over the following 3 weeks, I documented everything I could. I made copies of the photos. They had disappeared from the shared album within 12 hours, which told me Daniel had realized his mistake, and I saved them to a private cloud account only I had access to. I went through phone records I had access to on our shared plan, and I noted dates, times, call durations. I wasn't looking for more evidence of what I already knew. I was building a record for what I was going to need later. I also very quietly called an attorney. Not a divorce attorney. We weren't married yet. A general counsel who could help me understand my options regarding the engagement, the shared lease Daniel and I had signed, and one other thing I had been thinking about carefully. The venue, We had booked a beautiful estate venue 40 minutes outside the city. It seated 180 people. The deposit was significant. The contract was in both our names. The wedding was 4 months away. I had a plan forming. It needed time. And I needed to keep acting like everything was normal. That was the hardest part. Not the anger. I had somewhere to put the anger. It was fuel. Not the grief, though the grief came in waves, mostly late at night when the house was quiet and I let myself feel the full weight of what had been taken from me. The hardest part was Sunday dinners and double dates and the engagement party follow-up calls, and sitting across from Lauren at a bridal shop appointment 2 weeks after finding the photos, watching her hold up a veil and say, "This one is so you," with complete and total sincerity. I smiled. I said I loved it. I wrote it down in my notes when I got home. 6 weeks before the wedding, I made the final decision about how it was going to end. I had considered a number of options. I had considered cancelling quietly, telling Daniel I knew, calling off the engagement, letting Lauren find out secondhand. It would have been clean, it would have been private, and it would have let them move forward together without ever having to stand in front of everyone we knew and answer for what they'd done. I had considered confronting them together privately and simply ending everything without spectacle. But here's what I kept coming back to. Lauren had stood at my engagement party and given a speech about what our friendship meant. She had cried real tears, or what looked like real tears. She had let my mother hug her and thank her for being such a good friend to her daughter. She had sat in my kitchen and eaten my food and laughed at my stories and planned my wedding for 14 months while sleeping with the man I was going to marry. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice made over and over again for more than a year. And Daniel, who had proposed on a Sunday morning, who had said the words, who had stood in front of our families at the engagement party and talked about building a life, had made the same choice. I wasn't going to let them exit quietly. I was going to let them exit in front of everyone. I spoke to my attorney about the venue contract. I spoke to the caterer. I spoke to the florist. I spoke very carefully and very discreetly to my mother, the only person I told before the day itself. She listened to everything I said without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What do you need from me?" That was the moment I cried. The first time I cried since finding the photos. I cried for about 10 minutes and then I told her exactly what I needed. She did not flinch. I also, in those final 6 weeks, did something practical and important. I moved the financial pieces I needed to move. Daniel and I had a joint account we had opened for wedding expenses. I withdrew my contributions, documented carefully, split exactly down the middle, and moved them to a personal account. I consulted my attorney about the lease. I made arrangements. I bought a new dress, not a wedding dress. A dress for what comes after. The week before the wedding, I went through every motion. The rehearsal dinner where Lauren gave another speech. This one about how she had known from the moment she met Daniel that he was right for me. And I watched her say it and I thought with absolute clarity, tomorrow this ends. I slept well the night before my wedding, better than I had in weeks. There is a specific peace that comes from having a plan and being ready to execute it. I had done everything I needed to do. All that was left was the day itself. The venue was beautiful on a Saturday in July. The kind of day you can't plan for. Warm without being hot, a slight breeze off the garden. The light, that particular shade of gold that makes everything look like it's been filtered through something kind. 180 guests. Both families, colleagues, childhood friends, neighbours who had watched me grow up, my grandmother who had flown in from out of state, people who had known me my whole life. Lauren arrived at the bridal suite at 9 a.m. as planned. She was carrying coffee and a card, and she was wearing the specific expression of someone who is about to have the best day. She hugged me. She told me I looked stunning. She helped me with my veil. I let her. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:45, when the guests were seated and the music was beginning and the groomsmen were lined up and everything was exactly in position, I asked Lauren to give me a moment alone. She squeezed my hand and said, "You've got this," and stepped outside. I stood alone in the anteroom for exactly 3 minutes. I looked at myself in the mirror. I thought about the 3rd grade and the cartoon fox backpack, and the note I had passed across the aisle. I let myself feel all of it, the grief, the loss, the specific devastation of being betrayed by the 2 people you trusted most. And then I put it somewhere safe and I walked out. The ceremony began normally. The music played, the processional happened. Lauren walked down the aisle ahead of me, radiant in the dress we had chosen together, carrying the flowers I had picked. She took her place at the front. She smiled at Daniel. He smiled back. I noticed that smile. I filed it away. My father walked me down the aisle. He didn't know what was about to happen. He squeezed my arm twice, our signal. "Since I was a little girl, for I've got you." I squeezed back. The officiant began. We reached the point in the ceremony where he asked if anyone had cause to object to the marriage. There was the usual polite silence, and then I spoke. "Actually," I said, "I do." I have been told the sound that went through that room was unlike anything people had heard at a wedding before. Not gasps exactly, something more like a collective intake that lasted several seconds. I heard my grandmother say something in a language she only used when she was very surprised. Daniel went completely still. Lauren went completely still. I turned to face the guests. My voice was steady. I had practiced this part many times. "I want to thank everyone for being here," I said. "You came a long way, and I'm genuinely grateful for that. I also want to be honest with you because you're the people I love most, and you deserve honesty." I looked at Daniel. 4 months ago, you accidentally uploaded photos to our shared wedding album. The wrong photos. I've had them since March. The silence in that room was absolute. I looked at Lauren. "And you gave a speech at my engagement party about what our friendship means. You helped me plan this wedding. You've been my best friend since the 3rd grade. Her face had gone white. "I'm not going to stand here and list everything," I said. "You both know what you did. I just wanted you to know that I know too, and that I've known for 4 months. I turned back to the guests. "The reception is still happening. The food is paid for. The music is paid for. And I intend to eat a very good meal with the people I love. Daniel and Lauren are welcome to leave whenever they're ready." I handed my bouquet to my mother, who was in the front row and who received it with the composure of someone who had known this was coming and had prepared accordingly. Then I walked back up the aisle, alone in my wedding dress, in front of 180 people. It was the longest walk of my life, and also somehow the most certain I have ever felt about anything. The reception happened. I know that sounds strange, but it did. Daniel and Lauren left within 15 minutes of my walking up that aisle. I was told later that Lauren tried to follow me and was intercepted by my mother and my aunt, who were not gentle about it. Daniel, by most accounts, simply left without speaking to anyone. The 178 remaining guests, my people it turned out, overwhelmingly, did what people do when something enormous has happened and there is food and music available. They gathered. My grandmother found me first, took my face in her hands and said something in her language that I didn't fully understand but felt completely. My college friends formed a circle around me that lasted most of the evening. The caterer, who had overheard enough to understand what had happened, sent out an extra round of appetizers unprompted, which remains one of the kindest things anyone did that day. I danced. I ate the wedding cake, which was extraordinary. I gave a speech that I had also prepared, shorter than the one I'd planned for a different version of the day, about the people in that room and what they meant to me. I did not cry until I got home that night. Alone in the house I was already in the process of extracting myself from. And then I cried for a long time because the plan being executed perfectly did not mean none of it hurt. It hurt enormously. It was just that the hurt had a shape now, and a direction, and an ending I had chosen, rather than one that had been chosen for me. The practical aftermath was handled mostly in the weeks that followed. The lease was resolved with help from my attorney. The joint account had already been separated. I had, without Daniel knowing, spent the previous 6 weeks quietly untangling everything that needed untangling. By the time the wedding day was over, the only thing left to do was move. I moved into my own apartment 3 weeks later. Lauren tried to contact me 7 times in the first month. Calls, texts, a letter, an actual handwritten letter, which I read once and kept. I did not respond to any of them. There was nothing she could say that I needed to hear. The things that needed to be said had been said in front of everyone she knew and everyone I knew, in a room full of flowers, on what was supposed to be the best day of my life. Daniel tried twice. I responded once briefly to confirm the logistics of the remaining shared items. That was all. The story spread the way stories spread, through the people who had been there, then through the people who knew them. I heard various versions of it secondhand for months. In some of them I was tragic, in others I was terrifying. In most of them I was, I think, something people found hard to categorize. A woman who had been catastrophically wronged and had chosen very deliberately how to respond to it. I heard that Daniel and Lauren did not stay together. I heard that from 3 separate people who told me without my asking. I didn't find any satisfaction in it exactly, but I didn't find nothing in it either. 2 years have passed since that Saturday in July. I live alone now in an apartment I chose entirely for myself. No compromises, no negotiations, no, well, you like this neighborhood more than I do. I have a couch I love and a kitchen that faces east and gets morning light, and a bedroom that is entirely, completely mine. I have thought many times about what I would do differently. The honest answer is very little, not because I don't wish it had happened differently. I wish it every day. I wish I had never found those photos. I wish Daniel had been the person I thought he was and Lauren had been the friend I believed her to be. I wish I was writing a different story. But given what happened, given that it was always going to happen, that the photos were going to exist whether I found them or not, that the betrayal was already complete before that Tuesday in March, I think I made the right choices. I think I took the worst thing that had ever happened to me and I made it mine. I chose the ending. There is a version of this story where I confront them privately, where everything dissolves into tears and apologies, and the long, slow grieving process of a quiet ending. That version is not without dignity, but in that version, Lauren gets to keep her version of herself. Daniel gets to keep his. The story they tell becomes whatever they need it to be. In my version, the story is what it is. There were 180 witnesses. I have been asked many times whether it was worth it, whether the spectacle, the public nature of it, added anything real to the healing. I think about that carefully when people ask. And the answer I keep coming back to is this. It wasn't about spectacle. It was about truth. I had been living inside a lie for 4 months, and they had been living inside one for more than a year. And I wanted, just once, for the truth to be the loudest thing in the room. It was. I started therapy 6 weeks after the wedding, not because I was falling apart. I was functioning, I was working, I was moving through the days, but because I had been through something large and I wanted to understand it properly, rather than just survive it. My therapist is a small, precise woman who asks good questions and doesn't let me off the hook. She has helped me understand things about myself that I suspect I needed to understand, regardless of what happened. I am not closed to love. I want to say that clearly because people assume otherwise. I am not someone who has decided that people can't be trusted or that relationships are traps. What I have become is someone who pays very close attention, who watches for the gap between what people say and what they do, who keeps notes, metaphorically now mostly, and trusts the observations she makes. That version of me didn't exist before that Tuesday in March. I'm not sure I would have built her any other way. Last month, I ran into someone who had been at my wedding, a colleague of Daniel's, someone I'd met maybe 4 times over the years. We were in the same coffee shop and he recognized me, and there was that moment, the moment where someone tries to decide whether to acknowledge the thing or pretend they haven't placed you. He acknowledged it. "I was there," he said, "at the wedding." He paused. "I thought what you did was one of the bravest things I've ever seen." I thanked him, and I meant it because it was kind. But on the way home, I thought about the word brave and whether it was the right one. I don't think I was brave that day. Brave implies you're afraid and you do it anyway. I wasn't afraid. I was clear. There's a difference. Fear would have been cancelling quietly, absorbing the loss privately, letting them off the hook to protect everyone from discomfort, including myself. What I did instead was refuse to make my pain more manageable for the people who had caused it. That's not bravery. That's just refusing to disappear. If you're in a version of this, if you're sitting somewhere right now with information you haven't decided what to do with, if you're absorbing a betrayal and trying to figure out what shape the response should take, I'm not going to tell you to do what I did. My choice was mine, built from my specific history with these specific people. It won't be right for everyone, but I will tell you this: you get to choose the ending, not just whether to stay or go, not just whether to confront or walk away, but how the story closes, what the last image is, what the last true thing said in the room actually is. That belongs to you. Don't give it to the people who already took enough.